She taped an eviction notice to my gate with floral duct tape right as I was lighting a candle for my grandma's memorial. Name's Deacon Rhodes. I mind my business. But the creek, the path, and 200 feet of forest she just claimed, those aren't hers. Didn't argue, just reached under the porch, pulled out a parcel map signed in 1931. And smiled. Ever watched someone trespass into a trap they built for you? I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching beneath unfamiliar tires. At first, I thought maybe Garrett was swinging by early with that new fence post digger he kept promising to let me borrow. But when I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee in hand, the old mug still warm from the microwave, I saw no truck, no familiar figure, just a pale morning fog and the chill that comes before a spring storm. Then I saw it, a bright orange notice stapled crudely to the cedar gatepost, its corners already starting to curl in the damp air. The words, "Notice of Non-Compliance," screamed in all caps, followed by a deadline, 72 hours. Vacate the premises or face legal escalation. It was printed on cheap cardstock, but the stamp on the bottom looked official enough to make my gut tighten. I didn't touch it right away. Instead, I stood there a long minute, one socked foot on the threshold and the other still inside the cabin, coffee cooling by my lips. The birds weren't singing yet. The wind hadn't picked up. Just that sign, glaring in orange, nailed into the same gatepost I built with my father 40 years ago. When I finally pulled it down, my hands trembled a little. Not out of fear, at least not the kind I knew how to name. The envelope taped to the back contained a folded letterhead from something called the Clearview Ridge Homeowners Association. I'd never heard of them, but I'd seen the houses. They started popping up 3 years ago on the ridge just north of my land. Wide windows, rental signage, lawn gnomes. I figured the summer folks needed somewhere to gather, complain about the mosquitoes, and pretend they were living the simple life. The letter accused me by name of unauthorized occupancy of woodland held in trust and cited subsection bylaws I'd never agreed to let alone seen. It called me a squatter, said I was in violation of residential standards, and posed a visual nuisance. I read that part twice. I'm not a man given to fits of anger. I've always figured if something can be fixed, fix it. If it can't, let it rot in peace. But this was something else. It wasn't just a legal threat. It was an erasure, a denial of place, of memory, of sweat and pine and ashes. The land they claimed I was squatting on had belonged to my family since 1931. 3 generations had walked these woods. My father cleared the meadow that spring before I was born. My grandmother, Opal Rhodes, used to string up tin can alarms on the saplings to warn against snakes and revenuers alike. She always said, "This forest ain't worth much, but it'll never be taken from us." I never thought to ask why she said us in that tone or what paperwork she might have kept tucked away. That morning, after I taped the notice to the fridge, I took a walk down the back trail. The trees were just starting to bud, tiny green fists against a gray sky. I passed the old water pump, rusted and dry, and came to the edge of the ridge where the moss-covered stone still sat beneath the pine needles. I knelt to brush it off my jeans, soaking through with dew. Barely visible, carved into the face, were the words, "Patent Boundary, 1931. Most folks wouldn't have noticed it. Just another old stone among thousands. But I'd seen it all my life and never once thought to question its meaning. Now it whispered like a secret I was too old to ignore. I didn't talk to anyone that day. Garrett waved from his truck but didn't stop. Maybe he hadn't seen the sign. Or maybe he had. Either way, I nodded and kept walking. Back at the cabin that night after the storm rolled in and the frogs began to croak their hollow anthem. I opened the cedar chest in the attic. It had belonged to my grandmother. I'd kept it sealed since her funeral. Couldn't bring myself to rifle through the contents, not even when I needed her comfort most. But tonight, something pulled at me. That same stillness that comes before a hard truth. Inside the footlocker were the things you'd expect: folded quilts brittle with age, a hairbrush with more silver than bristle, recipe cards stained with bacon grease, and at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with twine, was a rolled map. I untied the cord with more care than I'd shown anything in years. The paper crackled stiff with time, but it opened clean. Across its face were boundary lines hand-drawn in black ink, faded in parts but unmistakable. My family's name was etched near the center T. Rhodes, written in a looping cursive I recognized from her Bible margins. Affixed to the bottom corner, sealed under a rusted wax circle, was a notation land patent, May 1931, Newton County, Arkansas, filed under Treaty Act. I didn't speak for a long while, just sat there on the attic floor surrounded by dust and ghosts. The thunder had moved on by then. Only a soft tapping of rain remained polite as a guest who knows they've overstayed. Finally, I whispered to the air, "This land doesn't belong to them. It never did." And then, with that same old laptop humming like a tired cat, I opened a browser tab and typed into the search bar, Land Patent Arkansas, Validity 2020. Spread across my dining table, under the dim light of an old glass-shaded fixture, was a map that made no sense. According to it, my property extended nearly 200 feet beyond what the Newton County parcel viewer had ever claimed. That meant the gravel turnaround, the deer path that twisted through the birch saplings, and the full bend of the southern creek were mine on paper at least. I had to sit down twice before I trusted my own eyes. The 1931 patent wasn't drawn with satellite precision, but it wasn't a child's sketch either. The ink lines followed natural contours annotated with creeks, ridgelines, and even an old oak that I now realized was the one that fell back in '98. A notary seal and wax stamp sat in the corner, dulled by time but still legible. My grandmother had wrapped the whole thing in waxed cloth and string like it was a treasure map. Maybe it was. I remembered her voice gravelly and amused. "They can build their pretty homes up there, but the roots run deeper on our side." Back then, I'd laughed, thinking at one of her front porch sayings like, "Don't argue with a buzzard," or "Coffee's only bitter if you rush it." But now it landed differently. Like maybe she'd been warning me in plain sight. That morning, Garrett dropped by with a steaming thermos and a half apology for not stopping the day before. I saw the orange notice he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Figured it was one of Brenna's stunts again. Didn't want to get caught in the storm. We sat at the porch steps, steam curling from our cups. "She's got the HOA all worked up about forest encroachments," he went on. "Last meeting she called folks like you, well, like us, really, legacy liabilities." Can you believe that? I could. But I didn't say it aloud. After he left, I brought the map inside, flattened it with soup cans at the corners, and pulled out my laptop. The county assessor's site was glitchy and slow, but I knew how to read parcel overlays. I'd done it before when that broadband crew tried to run fiber optic lines through the wrong part of the hill. And sure enough, when I aligned the GPS overlays against the patent map, I saw it. My grandmother's original claim encompassed a full half-acre more than the current records showed. It included the footpath, the clearing the HOA had marked as community trailhead, and the gravel turnaround Brenna had once called HOA staging space on Facebook. That's when I began to feel the sting beneath the insult. This wasn't just ignorance. This was a slow erosion covered in paper and politics meant to make folks like me feel out of place on our own dirt. Later that afternoon, I pulled up the HOA's public webpage never had a reason to visit before and scrolled through their bulletins. Right at the top was a post with a stock photo of a wooded stream and bold green letters, "Notice Southern Creek Trail, temporarily closed for preservation project." Below that, in smaller text, "Pending safety inspections, access will be limited to HOA members in good standing. Guest permits available upon request. Inquire at Trail Kiosk." Guest permits. For the creek I played in barefoot at age 6. The one where my Uncle Tolliver taught me to net crayfish and tie knots that wouldn't slip even if soaked overnight. Now it was preserved behind a paywall. My phone buzzed. Reception was spotty, but enough signal came through for the email notification to load. It was from Brenna Clifton. The subject line read, "Urgent Architectural Compliance Issue." The message was concise and smug, "Mr. Rhodes. It has come to our attention that you've installed an unapproved sign, Private Forest Trail, near the southern path entrance. This is in violation of HOA Guideline KIRU 6.4a regarding signage uniformity. Please remove or replace the sign within 48 hours to avoid formal complaint escalation. Regards, B. Clifton, Clearview, Ridge. HOA. President." She'd typed it like I was the problem. Like the land, the trail, and even the damn sign had always belonged to them, and I'd wandered in like a trespasser from my own past. I sat in silence for a while, just staring at the screen. Outside, pollen drifted like yellow smoke. The breeze had picked up, rattling the loose shutters I kept forgetting to fix. Then I remembered something. Something from before Opal passed. Buried in my voicemail folder, untouched for over half a year, was a message from Tolliver. He'd called after his last trip through Arkansas, just before moving to Tulsa. I clicked play. His voice crackled through the tiny speaker, warm and half-laughing Deacon. "If you ever need to verify boundaries, don't trust the county lines. Trust the roots. Trust what's been buried longer than these papers lasted. You know where to look." I listened to it twice, then a third time, letting the weight of his words settle into the space between my ribs. The cabin smelled like cedar and old pipe tobacco. I hadn't smoked in years, but the scent clung to the corners like memory. The orange notice still sat on the fridge, curling inward at the edges, as if shrinking from the truth it failed to comprehend. I looked back at the map. The line was there, bold and clear. Right through the middle of what they now claimed as their preservation project. Right through the creek, through the turnaround, through their assumptions. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a correction. The door to Tolliver's office groaned like it hadn't opened since the Clinton years. Paint chipped at the edges. A brass placard hung crooked on the cloudy glass Tolliver Roads Esquire. The Q had mostly flaked away, but he was there exactly where I left him, seated behind a battered oak desk with a cracked leather blotter squinting through half-moon glasses at something far too small for comfort. "Well, well," he said without looking up. "The prodigal landsman returns." He always greeted me like that half-sermon, half-sitcom. I dropped my backpack on the guest chair and held up the rolled parcel map like it was contraband. "I need you to tell me I'm not crazy." "Can't do that," he muttered, reaching for the reading lamp. "But I can tell you if the government is." I unrolled the map across his desk. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows, catching on the wax seal like a spotlight. Tolliver leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing. He didn't speak for a while, just traced the edge of the creek with one ink-stained thumb, then tapped the date. May of 31. Your grandmother wasn't playing around. She never said much, just that it'd never be taken from us. He nodded. She wasn't wrong. This isn't some backyard deed. This is a land patent issued under federal authority predating state subdivisions, let alone HOA bylaws. I exhaled. Not relief exactly. Just confirmation that the ground I stood on had bones. That maybe, just maybe, my roots weren't sentimental illusions. He turned in his chair and pointed toward a frame above the file cabinet. I'd seen it before years ago, but never cared to read the headline, "County Relents After Homestead Boundary Challenge, 1992. The photo beneath showed a younger Tolliver shaking hands with a farmer whose land had been slated for seizure until that old patent held up in circuit court. "Precedent," he said simply. "No one wants to be the one who fights an original patent. It's slow, expensive, and damn near unwinnable unless fraud was involved, which it wasn't. I'll bet my bar license your grandmother filed this in good faith." "So, what does that mean? That I can stay?" "It means," he said, pulling out a fresh legal pad, "the HOA doesn't get to act like kings of the ridge. Especially not when their charter was filed in 2020, and this map predates it by nearly a century." A breeze slipped in from the hallway, carrying with it the scent of copy toner and burnt coffee. The place hadn't changed in years. Same army green carpet, same ticking wall clock. Familiar in the way old boots are worn, dependable, maybe a bit out of step with the times. "Tell me something else," I said. "They've closed off the creek. Posted that it's for members only with permits." Tolliver's eyebrows lifted. "You've got something better than access," he said. "You've got riparian rights." I blinked. Meaning. "If that stream touches your land, especially under a federal patent, you likely own the use of it. Water rights, fishing, flow integrity. If they're selling permits using your stretch of creek, they're stepping on something more than just your pride." He opened his laptop, typed with 2 fingers, and pulled up the HOA's website. We both leaned closer as the splash banner loaded Clearview Ridge Fishing Club, exclusive to residents starting June 1st, $75 a month. Family-friendly access to pristine Ozark waters. The background photo showed a long angle of the stream I'd learned to skip stones on. Same bend, same overhanging alder tree. Hell, I recognized the broken fence post in the corner one I'd meant to fix before winter hit. "They're charging for access to your water," Tolliver said. "We'll need a survey quiet and professional, and I want Naomi on this." Naomi, my associate, environmental law. She's good sharp, graduated top of her class, and doesn't put up with bureaucratic ego. You'll like her. Just then, a knock at the office door, soft but deliberate. A young woman with auburn braids and a thick stack of files stepped in. She gave me a polite nod, glanced at the map, and raised an eyebrow. "I take it this is the forest squatter?" "Be nice," Tolliver said. "He's family." Naomi smiled, wry and efficient. "Then I like him already." Before we could speak further, my phone buzzed. 1 bar of signal. Garrett. I stepped into the hallway, pressed the call. "You seeing this?" he said. "I just drove past the trailhead. 2 of Brenna's little committee guys are out there yanking down your private forest trail sign." One of them laughed when I asked if they had permission. My stomach turned. "Did you get video?" "Oh, yeah," Garrett said. I've got everything from the bolt cutters to the smug grin. Back in the office, I sat hard in the guest chair. Tolliver didn't ask what happened. He could see it on my face. He leaned back, exhaled slow. They just made it real. Naomi leaned over the blueprint and muttered, "They're not just wrong, they're trespassing. And charging people for the privilege." She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Her finger tapped the creek line on the overlay with surgical precision, highlighting the jagged parcel edge in red Sharpie, and then the faint blue of the stream that snaked through it. Her pencil circled a shaded section labeled Common Recreation Easement CR7, a term the HOA had invented not found in any deed plat or title. Tolliver gave a low whistle. "Well, that's creative. CR7. Sounds like a cold remedy. Or a cover-up," Naomi said, slipping the page into a plastic sleeve. "They've labeled the same creek 3 different ways depending on which document they show. Classic misdirection." We were seated around a long table in the back of the Murrayville Records office. The room smelled like air conditioning laminate and old paper. Outside, the Ozark humidity clung like syrup. Inside it was all cold water cups and clunky government computers. Earlier that morning, I'd retrieved another of Opal's old boxes, the one with her utilities and tax stubs. Naomi found it in the back seat of my truck while we were loading equipment. Inside, a crumbling ledger, brittle as a wasp's nest, filled with water tax receipts stretching back to 1984. Not just bills, but canceled checks, all addressed to Rhodes Parcel, Riparian Lot 11C. "Deacon," she said, holding one up to the light, "your grandmother was paying use taxes on this stream before the HOA was even a rumor. This ledger is a time bomb, and it's ticking in your favor." I didn't speak, just ran a hand along the edge of the paper. The ink was faded, but the numbers were clear. Quarterly payments, precise dates. She'd held on to every slip, every folded bill. "Quiet giants," Tolliver muttered. "Your whole family. Always planting stakes so deep the neighbors never heard them hit bottom." Back outside, we drove the trail down to the creek bed. Garrett met us there with a backpack and a smirk. "Got something," he said, pulling out a tablet. "Drone footage last weekend." The video played on screen, low sweep across the canopy, the morning light casting gold across the water. And there it was, 2 families, coolers in hand, stepping down from the HOA-maintained path onto my trail, spreading towels under the shade. A laminated sign read, "Welcome to Clearview Creek Commons." Naomi's lips tightened. "That's not just trespass. That's monetized fraud." Garrett nodded. "And here's the HOA flyer they handed out at the last BBQ." He produced a printed sheet with cheerful fonts, Summer Fishing Club, $75 month, full access to Clearview's pristine waters. Right beneath the header, a smiling kid with a tackle box standing on a rock I recognized, one that sat exactly 12 feet from the old Rhodes footbridge. By late afternoon, we were back in Tolliver's office, sweat drying in patches across our backs. Naomi had drafted the formal cease and desist, 3 pages, letterhead sharp tone, clinical, to whom it may concern. The stream, designated as Clearview Creek Commons, falls wholly within a federally patented parcel filed in 1931 under the name T. Rhodes. Continued use without consent constitutes unauthorized trespass and misappropriation of water rights. Tolliver reviewed it in silence, then grabbed his fountain pen. With slow, deliberate strokes, he added a final paragraph by hand. "Our client is prepared to pursue recovery of all collected fees obtained under false pretenses from this property. This letter serves as formal notice of pending legal action." He underlined formal twice. Outside the window, the late afternoon sky turned amber. Shadows stretched across the ridge. I didn't feel angry, just rooted, like something buried long ago had finally risen to meet me. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from Garrett, this one with an attached video file. I opened it. Thermal drone footage. Timestamp 2:14 a.m. The trailhead entrance glowed faintly overexposed. A single figure appeared in the frame, walking deliberately along the ridge path. He paused near the tree line, looked up, then pulled something from a duffel. A ladder, and a cylindrical device. He strapped it to a branch, adjusted the angle, then disappeared into the darkness. The thermal camera caught it all, but one detail chilled me. He wore tennis whites, shirt tucked collar popped, HOA meeting casual. I paused the video, rewound, paused again. "Naomi," I said, holding out the tablet, "tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing." She leaned over. Her voice was flat. "They're installing surveillance cameras on your land, and they're doing it at night." Behind us, Tolliver sighed and reached for a fresh legal pad. The moment I stepped into the community hall, I saw my trailhead photo projected 10 feet wide across the wall, captioned in bold red, "Unauthorized occupation. Pending eviction." Fluorescent lights buzzed above. The folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, each with a paper HOA agenda tucked under the seat. A plastic table held a tray of untouched cookies and a sweating pitcher of iced tea. The air smelled of Lysol lavender and conflict. Brenna Clifton stood near the projector with the quiet confidence of someone who'd already rehearsed the outcome. Crisp navy suit, pearl necklace, matching folder with the HOA seal printed in gold. She tapped her notes and cleared her throat. I didn't sit. Through the windows, I could still see the fluttering orange flags staked by Naomi's team that morning, bright markers tracing the real boundary lines according to the 1931 land patent. They sliced clean through the edge of the HOA's community zone, spilling into their own parking lot. Garrett nudged me, camera already rolling on his phone. Brenna began. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining tonight's emergency HOA meeting. As you've all seen, we are dealing with a non-compliant occupant in the forest tract bordering Clearview Ridge." She clicked through to the slides, grainy photos of my cabin taken at awkward angles, a shot of my weathered private forest trail sign mid-removal, an overhead map with my section shaded in angry orange. She spoke in clipped, polished phrases. Devaluation of property, safety concerns, architectural violations, unauthorized trail use. Each phrase fell like a courtroom gavel, controlled, cold. When she reached the final slide, my stream frozen in a still from their ad campaign, she turned to the room. "We can't allow special exceptions. This affects all of us." A few nods. Someone clapped. Then silence. I took a step forward. The projector cable clicked into my laptop without protest. "May I asked. Brenna opened her mouth, but Sheriff Martinez beat her to it. "Go ahead, Mr. Rhodes." I clicked once. The screen shifted. Up came the GPS overlay. Naomi had prepared a high-resolution satellite image of the ridge matched against the 1931 land patent boundaries. Parcel lines drawn in gold. Surveyor flags marked. Property limits glowing with faint blue arcs. The shaded area Brenna had called community space was nearly a third inside my patent claim. And just to make the point clear, I clicked again. This time, an animated boundary pulse ran along the trailhead, then traced outward through the turnaround, through the gravel walk, through the picnic spot they'd built last spring. The overlay stopped 2 feet inside the wall of the very hall we stood in. Murmurs broke out. Brenna stood frozen, hand on her hip. Naomi stepped up beside me. The original federal land patent is on record at both the county clerk's office and the National Archives. It predates the HOA charter by nearly 90 years. Mr. Rhodes holds riparian rights, exclusive trail access, and historical tax documentation. Someone in the back, Sandra Keeney, if I wasn't mistaken, whispered, "Good Lord." Garrett raised his hand. "Would the board like to see how the trail sign was removed?" He pressed play. The video began with infrared clarity, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. A figure in tennis whites stepping into frame, duffel bag in hand, bolt cutters glinting. The sign dropped. A camera was mounted. The figure turned toward the drone, briefly revealing the HOA lanyard hanging from her neck. Gasps. Audible this time. One man in a folding chair stood up and walked out. Another removed his HOA pin and slipped it into his pocket. Brenna broke the silence. That was meant for wildlife monitoring. There was concern about feral hogs. Sheriff Martinez raised his hand, voice calm but firm. "That's trespassing. On private land. It's on camera." And just like that, the illusion fractured. No shouting, no slammed fists, just a quiet shift in the air. Heads turned. Necks craned toward me, then away from Brenna. Her pearls didn't sparkle so confidently anymore. I turned back to Naomi, ready to close the laptop. But she wasn't finished. She stepped forward, file in hand. "We haven't even discussed the creek fees yet," she said evenly. "Shall we?" Naomi's tablet lit the room like a stage light. She rotated the screen to face the crowd and said, just loud enough, line item, "Community amenity revenue. Total collected, year-to-date, $62,430. She let the silence hang. The number pulsed on screen, bold and sterile. Outside, rain had started light at first, tapping the windows like someone hesitant to interrupt. Inside, the air thickened. The folding chairs felt closer together, the overhead lights more surgical than fluorescent. Tolliver stood slowly, clearing his throat like he was preparing for church. He unfolded a slip of paper, yellowed at the corners, and read Article 4, Section D. Clearview Ridge HOA bylaws, ratified May 1997. No revenue-generating activity may be conducted on land not wholly owned or jointly deeded under the association. He looked up. Well, he said, folding the paper, this is awkward. The audience rippled, shifting murmuring. Even Dale Hollis, the board member in the second row, looked like someone had pulled his foundation out from under him. Naomi advanced her case without raising her voice. Over the past 6 months, the HOA charged monthly access fees for a creek and trail system located entirely within the federally patented parcel held by Mr. Rhodes. This includes unauthorized environmental use, commercial trespassing, and improper tax assessments. She tapped again. Resale brochures from 2020 to 2022 list the stream as a shared amenity used to boost home values despite no legal title to the feature. Brenna's face was still, but her fingers twitched once barely noticeable as she clutched the edge of her notes. Her pearl necklace had slipped askew. I didn't speak, just stood beside Naomi and Tolliver like a land post no one could move anymore. Garrett leaned forward in his chair, camera steady. I could hear him breathe. Then, from the back row, Sandra Keeney rose, quiet, composed. She walked forward holding a thin blue folder. Her voice when she spoke was low, but each word hit like the sound of a gavel. Ms. Clifton, she said, I pulled these from the HOA expense records last night, thought I should bring them. She handed the folder to Naomi, who opened it. Inside, 3 printed receipts. Legal Strategy Retreat, Hot Springs Spa and Resort. 2 nights, board. Only lodging reimbursement. Massage and conference package. Prepaid legal advisor meal. Riverwalk Cafe, Fort Smith. Each invoice billed under HOA's budget code, Community Legal Defense, Disputed Parcels. Naomi didn't look at Brenna. She passed the folder to Tolliver. Tolliver raised one eyebrow. Hot Springs, he said. Well, that is where all the finest lawyers soak their feet? Laughter. Sharp, bitter-edged. Sheriff Martinez, who had been watching from the back wall, stepped forward. We'll begin formal review of HOA funds immediately. No arrests. He paused for now. The words rang clean. Not dramatic, just final. Someone stood, then another. HOA lanyards came off like badges at a fallen fortress. One man ripped his agenda sheet in half. A woman near the front leaned toward Dale Hollis and asked something I couldn't hear. He only shook his head. And still, Brenna hadn't moved. Until she did. She reached for her leather tote, not the laptop, not the files, and slid the strap over her shoulder. No word, no look. She walked past me without brushing a thing. The door opened on a squeak. Rain painted a silver stripe across her suit as she stepped into the dark. Garrett muttered. She didn't even grab her laptop. And the river turned. A week later, the HOA signs were gone. In their place, laminated sheets hung neatly on trail posts and pine trunks, each one bordered in soft green ink and bearing the words Trail Access, courtesy of the Rhodes family. Please respect the land, the water, and each other. Someone had even taped one beside the old mailbox at the foot of the gravel turn. Same plastic sleeve, same green border, same tone, not proud, not bitter. Just quiet. The morning fog was lifting as I stepped onto the trail. Finches chirped overhead, darting between the cedar branches. Damp footprints lined the moss, some small enough to belong to a barefoot child. A rake leaned against the stump where Garrett had mounted the new camera. He waved from the far end of the clearing, one hand holding a screwdriver, the other adjusting a wildlife sensor. The camera blinked once, then went still. No more surveillance, he said, walking toward me. Just observation. Birds, raccoons. Maybe a black bear, if we're lucky. Lucky's one word for it, I said. Sandra arrived with a folding table and a crate of mason jars. She smiled when she saw the kids already dragging sticks and logs from the trail. Some of the families said they missed the old summer festivals, she said, setting the table down. Thought we'd try again. One day, only no booths, no permits, just cold lemonade and shade trees. I looked down the trail. The sunlight reached farther now, unhindered by the paranoia that once clung to every corner. Laughter rose from the creek bed. Someone had found a frog by the sound of it. Sandra wiped her hands on her jeans. I heard Tolliver's filing something. He is, I said. Non-profit trust. Land Stewardship Educational Outreach Conservation Funds. He's calling it the Opal Trust. She nodded, thoughtful. That's a good name. Later that afternoon, we gathered around a picnic bench under the hickory trees. Tolliver arrived with a manila folder and a coffee-stained napkin. This, he said, sliding it toward me, is the preliminary paperwork. Name's official now. Opal Trust. preserving what preceded. Has a ring, don't it? He smiled, then lifted the napkin. Drawn in blue pen was a rough sketch, an oak tree, its roots curling around a stream, and at the base a pair of initials, O.R. She wouldn't want it flashy, he added. Just rooted. I didn't say anything, just held the napkin a little longer than I needed to. Evening came slowly. Crickets started their hum just as the county envelope arrived, dropped off by a clerk driving a battered Subaru who didn't bother knocking. The paper inside was crisp. Please confirm whether the road's patent parcel 11C is to be maintained as private land or if the owner wishes to authorize a limited-use public license. Form 423B attached. No threats. No pressure. Just a question with a blank box waiting to be checked. I held it in my hands as I walked down to the water. The kids were still there, skipping stones, filling jars with tadpoles. Sandra handed out cookies. Garrett had set up a tripod near the edge, capturing the sunset against the ridge. I folded the form once, then again, and tucked it into my back pocket. Maybe we can do both, I said aloud to no one in particular. The creek answered in ripples. At the picnic we called Reclaiming the River, the first thing people noticed wasn't the lemonade or the check-in booth or the bluegrass quartet tuning up under the canopy. It was the sign. Wood-burned, hand-carved, mounted to a post of polished cedar opal trail, in honor of stewardship. It stood just beside the footbridge that crossed the creek's narrow bend. Someone had hung a sprig of fresh pine from one corner. Another had tucked a folded paper crane into the wooden frame. The clearing buzzed with quiet joy. Not the rowdy kind of celebration, but the sort that grows slowly, one handshake, one folding chair at a time. Garrett was manning the lemonade table, wearing a wide straw hat and explaining to 3 kids how to use the hand pump thermos. Behind him, Sandra pinned up a hand-drawn trail map that showed wildflower blooms by season. A few feet away, Tolliver and Naomi were arranging brochures next to a modest sign that read, Opal Trust Information and Forestry Youth Grants. A little later, I took the small wooden stage and cleared my throat. The mic squeaked once, then settled. Thanks for being here, I began. You know this land has seen a lot. It's older than most of us. Some of you learned to fish in this creek. Some of you helped build that footbridge. Some of you still call this forest home even if you didn't realize it until now. A few chuckles. Heads nodded. A child pointed at a dragonfly mid-hover. I wanted to tell you, I continued, that starting this fall, the Opal Trail Fund will offer small grants to high schoolers interested in forestry, water conservation, and local history. We'll work with teachers and community groups to support education that grows roots right here. There was applause. Polite, but warm. The mayor gave a thumbs up. One of the older teachers patted her chest and mouthed finally. Tolliver stepped up beside me, waving a folded document. We've also filed the first usage license, he said. This land remains under private stewardship, but it is now designated for limited educational access free of charge. Gasps, good ones this time. Naomi added, no profit, no gate, just permission, and that's how it turned. Not a legal victory, not even a moral one, something quieter, deeper. The kind of shift that grows over time like roots beneath stone. Back near the big maple, I knelt beside the old iron footlocker, the one I hadn't touched since my grandmother's funeral until this spring. I opened it one last time. Inside were the items that had carried me through the patent map, the water receipts, Opal's last note. I left them all there, sealed it shut, and placed it under the tree. A small plaque now leaned beside it for those who remember. Garrett stood with a group of teenagers, each holding a dogwood sapling. One by one, they planted them along the trail's edge, tucking the roots gently into the soil. Sandra joined me, holding a frame. Inside, a newspaper clipping. The man who didn't raise his voice, and still won. I smiled. You kept it, she grinned. Wasn't gonna let it become packing material. The music swelled again. Down to the river to pray sung slow and raw voices worn with age but rich with memory. Some people joined in, others sat with their eyes closed. The breeze shifted warm and steady. As the crowd thinned and the sun dipped behind the ridge, I walked home the long way past the now cleared trail over the small footbridge under the high canopy that had always watched even when no one else did. At the cabin, I reached for a nail and a scrap of wood I'd carved that morning. Just 3 lines burned into the grain. Still here, still watching, still mine. I hung it gently beside the door, and for the first time in months I sat on the porch and didn't think about what came next. As the sun dipped below the ridge that evening, the light caught on the wooden plaque by my door. Still there, still weathered, but now gleaming just enough to be seen from the trail. I'd spent months defending lines on a map, but it turns out some boundaries are meant to be shared, not fought over. Justice came not with anger, but with patience and a little help from those who remembered how things used to be. Sometimes, when you hold your ground with quiet steadiness, life circles back and offers you a softer version of what you were fighting for. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story. Leave a comment or share it below.